Hello, everyone. We're all here together today, and we're going to talk about oppression and privilege and its impact on intimacy and relationship. And I'm Danielle.
And I'm Celeste. We're the co-founders of the Somatica Institute, and we feel very strongly that the countrywide push to deal with racism, oppression, and privilege that's happening right now must continue to grow and build momentum. I think we're at the very beginning of it, and we believe that dealing with the systemic issues, which is just so much more than just terrible policing, which absolutely needs to change, but we have to look at the impact of oppression and privilege in every area of our lives, and that's why we created this webinar.
Since our work is around relationship and intimacy, we invited beautiful three brilliant, self-aware, and wise Somatica graduates to talk about their experience of how oppression and privilege have impacted their experience of intimacy, and how we can all be a part of the change that needs to happen in the world right now and ongoing. Well, we're past due. It's time.
I'm going to start out just asking you to each introduce yourself before we dive into questions so that people know who you are.
So my name is Danika, Danika Renee. I am a recent Somatica graduate, and I still consider myself a student, a long-term student.
Sure, let me unmute myself. Hi, I'm Tori King, and I'm a graduate of Somatica program as well from 2015, 16, 17. I can't stay away. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm back in here. And I'm also a sex and relationship therapist and coach, and I'm here to be a participant and not in the role of a educator per se, aside from my own education, my own experience.
Hi, my name is Bryan. I also am a Somatica core training graduate. I completed the core training last year with Danika. And as a way to keep it practical to in a daily practice, I also have begun a effort to do practice work. So I have a few clients, and I share the value of Somatica through that vehicle.
Sorry, I was muted and started talking. Okay. So we just want to bring in some questions to start the discussion rolling. And our first question for all of you is, how do you think privilege and oppression have affected your ability to connect with people or have intimacy in the world on a day-to-day basis? And I know it's a big question, but just see which, what it brings up for you.
I'll kick us off. Because this is Tori again. And what I noticed even today joining in on the webinar is there's something that kicks in for me that's like, I need to perform, right? And that keeps me from being vulnerable, right? And so the breathing helped, and I thank us for doing that before we got started, because there's a way that I think I've been taught to put on a certain face as a person of color, as a Black woman, that I need to look happy. I need to be, it's like wear a different mask than how I actually feel. And so I'm nervous, right? I'm nervous right now, and I might cry. I feel like I'm going to cry right now, and so yeah. I think, it's impacted my ability to be like fully present and fully open and vulnerable with people, because of being taught I need to be a safe person. I need to be a happy person. I need to not be an angry Black woman. And so that's just one way that just even showed up for me this morning. And so I'll stop there and let other people add in things.
Thank you, Tori. That feels really vulnerable. And
thank you, Tori. I also am feeling a lot of nervousness and anxiety about this. I have a similar feeling about it. Like coming into it, I have this big feeling like I also need to perform and show up and make sure that I have something to say and can share. And I think that I also, like, when I'm just interacting with people, I try to not be too much for people as a Black woman. Also, I have learned to kind of keep myself small and approachable. And it's like, I'm a little nervous right now. Excuse me. I'm gonna just I tend to go a little all over the place, but I feel like I personally tried not to be too intense for people. I don't want to come off as someone who gets angry in public or who is seen as the negative stereotype that Black women tend to have thrown at us if we're too much. And so I feel really grateful to be able to be on the webinar here today and to be able to share my own story and my own experiences. And it's a little challenging, you know. I also grew up like kind of learning to only speak when spoken to also, and not have too much of a opposing opinion, because that would push me outside of the knitted circle. And I grew up going to a school that was predominantly white. And so it was all about trying to fit in and not be too different for anybody. And even in school, like, it was hard to be myself because I wasn't one of the first choices. I was more on the outskirts of the experience. And so I don't know, I just, like, I find myself, even when I go to parties, I don't approach anybody, but I always make sure that, I always tend to have more of the be open myself so that people feel like they can approach me. And so that's a way that I notice that it affects me. And when I interact with other people, just keeping my energy small, making sure I stay open to people so they feel like they can approach me, and not being too loud or too mad or too angry.
Yeah, I think that says a lot. When I think about privilege and oppression, I think about the opportunities that are afforded to some that are not available to all. And I also feel like I've paid attention to the things that happen for one person at the expense of another. And so growing up and living Black has been an exercise in finding the spaces in which I'm tolerable. And so both Tori and Danika spoke to this: am I doing it right? Am I being the proper Black woman? Not the authentic Black woman who I am, but the Black woman who you want to see in this moment, in this time. If I act in my true nature, will it cause fear in someone else? If someone turns a corner looking for someone to blame, is the presentation that I'm giving now going to work in my favor or against it when it comes to the projections that they have in their head? And so a lot of my experience as a Black male has been trying to be the best that I can as invisibly as possible. Because for one reason or another, to shine attracts attention, and sometimes too much attention is not a good thing. So that, I feel, is oppression. And I recognize that there are privileges that I have as a male that are not afforded to my Black female sisters, because there's intersectionality there, right? And this male-dominated culture does give me some opportunity in some spaces. But as we're seeing in the news today, in other spaces, being a Black male is the absolute worst thing you could imagine being. When a cop when law enforcement is in an intense situation and feels fear, the worst thing you could be is a Black man. And it's a privilege to be able to see law enforcement as something other than a knee on your back. So I think that from the moment that I'm assuming that most of this audience is in the United States. So from the moment that we taught ourselves that this land was discovered in 1492, even though there were people here when it was discovered, all the way up to now, we have found ways to make some people better than others and to force other people to live in a way that is safe for others. And so I would start there and just say, my life and the way that I've grown up, despite the fact that my early childhood is full of wonderful memories of being surrounded by Black people of all kinds. I grew up my first 8 years of schooling in a predominantly Black private school. And so the smart kids, the jocks, the artists, the nerds, the troublemakers, everyone was Black. And so I felt that I could be whatever I wanted to be. And that's a privilege to me, because I think that so many Black children don't get that picture when they're starting out. But even still, as an adult, I struggle with seeing my authentic self as something that has value to this world. And so that shapes the way that I interact and the wounds that I carry even into adulthood.
Thank you so much for sharing so vulnerably.
And I could just see so much how that the impact on intimacy of all of the things that you're saying, like how much you have to hold yourself in and how much intimacy needs the ability to exchange, right? And that containment means you don't get the safety to have the full exchange of yourself in so many spaces.
And the trust as well, as Tori talked about, and Bryan and Danika talked about, like the trust to be yourself, and that people can, and you can be vulnerable and people will accept you and relate to you in that way. Yeah. Yeah. So we're gonna talked about intimacy and relationship, and I wonder if you would like to share, how do you feel it impacted your romantic relationships?
This question makes me a little nauseous because I had a recent experience. So I recently I've been recently feeling more empowered in who I am. After taking Somatica last year, I feel like it really opened me up to myself, and I started to accept myself for who I am. And I decided to reconnect with my hair. I've been wearing European extensions for a really long time, because at one point I was told by someone that I would be more beautiful if I did that. I would be more sexy if I did that. And so recently I was like, I'm going to reconnect with who I am, because that just feels like that's like this part of me is arising and it wants to claim its space back. And so I took out the extensions and I was wearing my natural curly hair and feeling so much more connected to who I am and so much more empowered. And one of the first experiences I had after taking down my extensions, was I went grocery shopping with my partner, and we were checking out, and when we were just about finished, we had a lot of groceries. We like to go in one big trip and just get everything, and we had a lot of groceries. And as we were checking out, the cashier, she was an older white lady, and she looked at my partner, who's an older white male, and she said to him, just looked at him, completely ignored me, and she was like, "It's a good thing you brought your little helper with you." And I was just like in absolute utter shock that she had said that. And I just kind of stood there wanting to say something, but feeling the words get caught in my throat. I couldn't bring myself to say anything to her about it. And I looked over at my partner, who was also on the spot, and he felt really nervous and uncomfortable about it as well. And he couldn't say anything. And so I ended up storming out of the store angry with the both of them. Why do I have to be the one to speak up for myself? Or why do I have to expect my voice to be the only one that says something in a situation like that? Not I didn't want to make him the bad guy for it, because it's such a tricky situation, and that's the first time we've experienced that sort of discrimination in our relationship. And so I ended up holding in most of that emotion and venting off to one of my best friends about this lady and what she said and how horrible it was, and how my partner wasn't able to say anything about it, and how it just kind of distanced us for a little bit. And I don't know, I just think at that moment kind of was my first real experience of that. And I just felt I don't know if I want to continue claiming myself. It was a real blow to my confidence. But it also, what was really beautiful about it was that once I had vented most of the anger and the frustration elsewhere, I was able to talk to my partner about it, and we were able to come back together and talk about, hey, yeah, this is a real thing that we haven't really paid attention to before, or really gave time and attention to. And so that allowed us to come closer together after the fact. But that was it was really hard.
I think there's again, there's an intersectionality that may be less total intersection and more just parallel roads. For myself and my sexuality, and the way that I feel, or that I've historically felt about my erotic desire, has been shaped by two things. One is growing up and being surrounded in a culture of Christianity, which often shames sexuality. And the other is, as a Black male, being both an attractor and a threat, all for reasons that have nothing to do with who I am. And so from having relationships with people that ended simply because they would never be able to share it with their family, to having people's interest in me have nothing to do with who I am and only have to do with my skin color. It makes you very cynical and suspicious whenever someone actually presents authentic desire to you, which can be problematic. Even now, unpacking the experiences of my life with my spouse, I realize that, and actually was just talking to her about this topic yesterday. I realized that I went into the relationship with my wife, trying very hard to be the person who I felt that she deserved, not trying to be myself. And a lot of the issues that we've faced over the years, we've been together over 20 years, dating and married. And a lot of the issues that we faced have stemmed from the fact that she struggles to know who I am because I'm perpetually presenting to her who I think she deserves, that's something other than me. My sexual preferences are bad. Who I am as a Black male is questionable. My wife is a person of color, but is not Black, and so it took a while for me to convince her family that I was serious relationship material. And so not only proving to her, but to her siblings and to her parents and to her community. And then once you get married, making sure that, you have a good job and you have a nice house and you are able to provide so that there's no doubt, because the moment that something goes wrong, you should have known this Black guy. What were you thinking? So intimacy is something that is, I would say my understanding of it is just at the beginning as a result of the wonderful work that I've been doing with Somatica, being able to go back to various points in my life and recognizing the beauty that was there all along. And then now in 2020, learning how to show up and present who I am authentically, knowing that maybe some people may not be interested in that, but that it's valuable nonetheless. That's the lesson and the practice and the work that I'm doing right now.
Just appreciating both of you, just shaking my head. Oh my gosh. Relating, I can relate to both your stories, and something you said, Bryan, makes me think of, I think, a experience that I've had and other Black folks have had that they've shared as well, is just this whole idea of this question of, do you want to be in relationship with me, or are you with me because of some other reason, right? Like this idea, and I think I've experienced being kind of fetishized, as a Black woman. I'm biracial, and when I moved to Texas when I was 9, and lived there for 6 years. And my experience there was very racially divided, and I had an interesting experience being in Black community because I was lighter skin, and so even some of the Black men or Black boys, I would say at the time, were interested in me because I was light skinned, and that was some sort of novelty, right? And white people at the time, we generally did not date white people. It was very separated, very separated. But I think I took that experience further, kind of almost like what you said, and had the suspicion of, someone interested in being with me for me, or is it because of the color of my skin? You were looking for a novel experience. There's some idea you have about what it means to be with a Black woman. And so that has definitely impacted, how I can show up in relationship with with folks. So I too am grateful for having unpacked a lot of that and continuing to unpack it now. And I mean, I think even at this moment, I feel like I only want to date, people of color who at least have some understanding of what it means to be in what it might mean to be in other skin, and how we are looked at as an other or an object.
Yeah, and I think you called out a good point that oftentimes isn't really illustrated to others outside of the community, that even within the Black community, the Black community is not singular. We have people that come from all over the country and from other countries with different histories. It's very easy when you're doing statistical analysis to throw everyone under the category of Black. But the reality is that the Black who is from California is maybe different from the Black who was actually born in Jamaica, who is different from the Black whose parents were from Zimbabwe or wherever. Haitian Black, and my mother is from Central America. She was born there. Her parents were born there. Her grandparents were born there. Her first language is Spanish. She jokes that she wasn't Hispanic until she came to the U.S., right? She was always La Negra, which is, to be Black. And so for her experience being a Black woman in Central America is different from the experience of being a Black woman in the United States. And so that's one thing. There are so many different cultures and backgrounds to be considered when you are saying the word Black community. That's one. The second is that even within that culture, having such a rich diversity, there is still oftentimes a predisposition for or against skin color. A light-skinned person will be treated more favorably than a dark-skinned person within the culture because of the systemic racism that exists in the world. And so a light-skinned person may be treated favorably or be considered attractive, or they may also be ostracized and criticized. And so the last thing that I will put in here is related to that last piece, is that there's always a desire within a Black person to associate with their Blackness. And sometimes within ourselves, we call that into question. Oh, you grew up around white people, you're not Black. Or, oh, your skin like that, you're not really Black. And we tear ourselves down out of the shame that we've endured for generations. We tear ourselves down because we are lost and lonely, and there's no one who's reaching out to our needs. There's no one whose voice is speaking out for us when we get incorrectly assigned a designation in the checkout line. So because of that, we turn and we lash out against each other. And that's something that also has a significant impact on our ability to be intimate, and how we oppress ourselves in the pursuit of avoiding the oppression of the society that we live in.
Thank you so much. I feel like what you're saying is creating such a wonderful complexity, and there's not one way to experience being Black in America, and that there's so many different cultures, right? That we have this unilateral, this is what Black is, and that just wipes out the amazing diversity and the complexity within the experience. I think some of you already started to touch on it a little bit, but we did want to talk more, if there's more that you feel like you have to say around how oppression and privilege have affected your sexuality or your body image or your desires. So if you have things to add about that.
Just I'll add, adding on to just this idea of, you know, if I'm fetishized, right, then there's this experience, and I took on this experience and this role of like, my role is to serve. My role is to be, I am an object. I am, my body, my sex is not my own. It is for others. And I got that messaging early on, you know, just overall, I think just as a Black person, but also just in sexuality, that I'm here to, you know, if I'm your girlfriend, and therefore I am your servant. And that definitely has influenced my sexuality, because pleasure was not for me, right? It was like, pleasure is this privilege that is only afforded to men. That was my experience, and that seemed real, right? Even growing up watching, when I saw porn growing up, it was again, it was for men's pleasure. Didn't really, I couldn't pick up that women were really enjoying it. If anything, they had to figure out how to make a lot of noise and, you know, make the guy feel really good. So it's like I think I grew up feeling like I have to perform in some way. I have to be here for other people's pleasure. So like, it wasn't my experience to have pleasure during sex. It was always for someone else. And it wasn't until like 7 years ago that I started doing my own journey and discovering my sexuality through high and also through Somatica, that I learned that, wow, like pleasure and sex is for me. And I had to kind of figure out what that was and how to figure it out. It takes a lot of work. And I'm still learning. But one thing I also noticed was when I would see porn or images, they would mostly be of white people or white women, especially. And I grew up thinking that my body wasn't quite right, that my vulva, my vagina was weird looking, that it wasn't pretty. And so I never wanted to be sexual with the lights on. I never wanted for anyone to go down on me, because I didn't want them to look at it, right? And so again, and I had that experience for, you know, years, even up into my 30s. So it's a long-standing pattern, and sadly is not. I was not alone. I've had other friends of mine that had never looked at their own vulva, because they felt like it's ugly, and that was a messaging, I think, I somehow received or took in growing up. So yeah, basically the main parts of my sexuality is, sex is not for you. Pleasure is not for you. Pleasure is for someone else. And you're here to serve. You're here to please other people. And you're here to be used, right? And so those things have definitely shaped my desire, right? And I've like uncovered a lot through Somatica, right? And learning what is my core desire. And that's been really helpful, because I can use those things to my advantage. But it has definitely shaped me.
Thanks, Tori. I wanted to add to what I said earlier. I also feel the same as Tori, where I feel like more like I'm usually objectified when it comes to sexuality, and I'm not really seen as who I am. I'm sexualized in a way that seems more like as fetishized instead of actually accepting me. And so just listening to Tori speak, I'm having my own memories of like growing up in school and like I went to a predominantly white school and was more on the outskirts of everything because I wasn't one of the beautiful girls, one of the popular girls. I didn't look like them. And I even, like, I was just thinking, I went to prom by myself, and even though I went to prom by myself, there were guys, Black guys, who really liked me at the time, but they felt like they could only see me secretly. So they would reach out to me after hours. They would ask me to come hang out after hours. And then at school, I wasn't like, they would see me, but it wasn't like there wasn't a connection there. It was like, yeah, we see you, but you're not, you're not these other girls. And so I kind of gravitated more towards white guys, but there I found a different kind of attention. I found the attention, more of the fetishizing attention. I've had guys tell me, "Oh, I've never been with a Black girl before. I've heard they're different, blah, blah, blah." They want to like try. And at first I thought that, like, I really took that as like a compliment, like, "Oh, wow." Like, I would love to be your first experience. Like, I was already not getting attention from others, and now I'm getting this sort of attention. It felt better to me. And so, so I started like dating white guys at that point, and still feeling detached from who I was because I still wasn't being authentically myself. I didn't feel like I could be. And I was trying to look a certain way for them. Like I said earlier, I had the European extensions in for a long time. I still do sometimes, but before it was the very first time I ever put them in was because someone told me that I would look better if I had them. And so I embodied that, and I just became this basically an image or a sex object for people. And I, for a really long time, loved that. Like, I was really eating up that attention, but it felt so inauthentic to me, and it still does so often. And it's hard. I find it even now, it's hard for me to really be myself because I don't really trust that that I'm good enough in that way. But I feel like I'm really growing in that area. It's definitely a daily, not a battle, but it's a daily practice of just continuing to remain true to who I am. And
thank you, Danika. As the male in the panel, I guess mine is a little different, but you can see some similar overtones or themes. Sexually, I consider myself to be repressed, and I think that, again, I guess is going to be my buzzword for this thing, is the intersectionality of Christian living and being a Black male just are like a very nice 1-2 punch as far as you being bad. A lot of my sexual desires and also my sexual self-restrictions stem from this concept of badness, right? I struggle with bringing my full erotic desire to the forefront, even with people that I trust. And because I don't want to overwhelm, because I feel that when someone is with a Black male and they feel overwhelmed, that Black male is imminently in danger. So to avoid myself from there is no scenario I can imagine in my mind of a sexual nature where I would be the person who people would side with. Even as a married man, a long-term relationship with my spouse, that if there were ever something that she would feel uncomfortable with, and or if there was ever a scenario that just people had to choose one side or the other, it's not a good look to be a Black male in that situation. And so it's very difficult for me to bring my full energy and sexuality to the forefront. And usually when I do, it's in a kind of, I don't want to say blind rage, but like I trance. I don't partner connect. Instead, I go inward, and I kind of just get wrapped up in my emotions and my pleasure, and just lock the world out. And it wasn't until Somatica that how much I realized that in and of itself was a defense mechanism in the bedroom, right? That if I'm going to engage in my desires, and those desires are bad in the world, I can enjoy them myself internally, partner connecting with myself, so to speak. And so that's the thing. I definitely resonate with what Tori was saying around not seeing yourself depicted in porn. I think that for a Black male, we saw ourselves depicted in porn before Black women, but neither of them were very good depictions. And so as a result, I think growing up, in my late teens and 20s, my sexual interests were generally not Black women. I struggled to find an erotic connection to Black women, not because I didn't find them beautiful, but because I considered them like my sister, or like someone that I needed to protect, which actually, in saying that, implies that my sexual desire is something that is violating, and that I wouldn't give to people who I care about, which is really screwed up. So it took me a while to really connect the beauty and the joy and the loveliness that I find in Black women to my sexual desire. It was something that I felt I needed to cherish and protect, not something that I felt that I could participate in, because I felt that my sexual energy was violence against that, right? And so, to be quite honest, a lot of the visualization of Black males in adult entertainment is one of violence, and so not paying attention to boundaries, pushing the limits, and generally being in many ways treated or allowed to act in ways that would be characterized as animalistic. When you're watching your softcore love story type thing, that's when you don't see the Black man in the adult film, right? So all of those things have impact on how we see ourselves and how we engage. There's a lot, again, interwoven with the whole Christian upbringing, because I grew up where people said save your sex until marriage, and I actually saved myself not until marriage, but until the person that I was going to marry. But in that same church that told me to not have sex until I was married, it was predominantly single mothers and single parent households, right? And so there was this sense of sex is bad, so don't get caught, because it feels good, right? And so that other layer, combined with the fetishization and the not seeing yourself portrayed in the representations of sexuality and sensuality that are most prevalent in the mainstream, just ultimately shut down a lot of the way in which I felt about my desire, and encouraged me to operate in very safe but ultimately unfulfilling ways.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your shares, and I want to take it to the next conversation, because you already started to mention the process, and you all went through this and still are on the journey of sexual empowerment and personal empowerment. And I wonder how this sexual empowerment impacts your sense of empowerment in other areas of your life as well.
Yeah, I think it wasn't, a lot of people find this incredulous, but I feel that it wasn't until deep into my Somatica training that I actually accepted the notion that I was an attractive Black male. I think I grew up feeling that it was my intelligence and my wit and charm that was the thing that would draw people to me, and not my looks. And so outside of the bedroom or outside of even a sexual type of environment, but just being who you are, I think that it impacts who a Black male tries to be if they don't consider themselves to be of value physically, right? Or if they want to avoid the negative connotation of value that has been assigned to them because of their physicality. I've had well-meaning managers in the workplace trying to connect with me as I start on a new job, assume that they can talk to me about basketball, right? Because come on, all Black guys like basketball, and I mean, to be quite honest, I enjoy basketball, but like, what the fuck, you know? So, right? No one asked me about, you know, the year I spent in South Korea learning to speak Korean, or the fact that when I started college, my intention was to be a choral director in Baroque music, right? These are things that you have to put out there. And it kind of is this chicken or egg kind of situation where, did I take on those things to have versatility that will allow people to see me differently? Or are these my actual interests and or are these my actual interests and I'm doing those independently and they're my true passion, right? So I think just being a Black person in America is really, and this is going to sound odd, the best thing you can be. Because our history begins and ends in America. Our history connecting us to Africa was stripped away from us. When we came over on the slave ships, we were separated from our families, and our fathers were moved around to stud from slave plantation to slave plantation, and our kids were sold and distributed so that we would never have a consistency that would allow us to have pride in ourselves. And so everything that a Black person is today is the result of what America made them. There are very few people who could have a stronger claim to being an American than Black Americans today. And that's why I think it's an opportunity for us to look through the pain and to see how this nation belongs to us. And there's an opportunity for us to have pride in ourselves, to see how wonderfully we can live and how wonderfully we can experience despite all of the obstacles that have been placed in front of us, in spite of all the ways that society has taught us that we shouldn't love ourselves. If we can love ourselves and persist in that, despite that, it shows this wonderful character. And I think it's important when we talk about the struggles and the obstacles to being a Black person in today's world, that we also speak to the resilience and the persistence and the passion and the love that exists that allows us to persevere despite. And so, yeah, I guess I'll pause there, get off my soapbox for a second.
I really appreciate what you said, Bryan. You spoke to a lot of my own experience, especially around, questioning the things that we take on in our lives and whether it's really our true, authentic desire, if it's to build upon this image that is accepted by society around us. And I feel that I didn't really start doing that until the first weekend of Somatica last year. Just exploring boundaries, having boundaries was my very first lesson in that, and knowing that I have a say in things, and I have a choice in the type of person that I want to be, and just unpacking and unraveling all of this that my authentic self has been kind of trapped underneath. And so I feel like learning to say no, for one, was a big thing, an absolute big part of my personal empowerment, and just reconnecting with what I truly desire out of life and what I truly want and who I truly want to be. I mean, I'm still trying to figure that out, because after graduating from school, I realized, oh, I wasn't really going to school for me. Like, who is this person I was trying to be? It doesn't really fit with who I authentically feel I am. I don't know yet who that who that woman is underneath all of that, but I felt like it just wasn't congruent with who I really am. And so I feel like my sexual empowerment, and starting with boundaries and saying no and really owning my true desires, has really allowed my personal empowerment to come through, because I'm reconnecting with who I am. And what else do I want to add? Oh, I also wanted to add that, like, I feel like I'm actually using my voice more, which is something that I haven't done. Like, I usually only respond when I'm spoken to. I'm not good at initiating something. I'm better at, following the lead and like taking it from there, and now I feel like I'm being way more intentional and way much more assertive than I've been before. And now in this particular climate, I really feel like I deserve respect. And it wasn't something that I really ever felt before. That wasn't something that that wasn't just a solid core part of me. And that has really been revealed through doing the work that I've been doing to empower myself.
So beautiful. I'm just, I'm feeling really a lot of excitement when I hear just both of your journeys to finding empowerment. And I mean, I can just echo lots of what you said. And I feel like Somatica definitely was really instrumental for me as well in finding my own sense of power. Because when I was walking around in the world disconnected from my sexuality, it's like I'm just in my head, or maybe I'm in my heart, but like I'm not in my body. I'm not like feeling my pussy, and like what, Danielle likes to say, use your pussy as an oracle. There's a way that I can feel my authentic yes and my authentic no in experiences. And that serves for boundaries, right? Like you were talking about, Danika, and like to be able to know what I want. And then to, I think one of the awesome things, and we're not here to sell Somatica at all, but that wasn't the intention of Celeste and Danielle in inviting us to speak, but like it has been an amazing program to unpack a lot of shame and move through shame, and then to be able to figure out like, well, what do I want? If I can have what I want, like, what do I feel? What do I want? And then to be able to ask for that, but to be able to know what I want, I got to be able to feel my body. I got to be able to feel like, well, what turns me on? I got to be able to express that. And so to have had a lot of, we do a lot of experiments and, like trying things on and practices where that has allowed me to figure it out, as opposed to just going along with what someone else wants, being there for someone else's pleasure. It's like learning what is authentically my desire. And in knowing that and being empowered around sex, it just translates throughout so much, because, you know, we walk through the world in our body. But if I'm now in my body, I'm no longer just letting my body be kind of abused or taken advantage of. I'm paying attention to how I feel in everything, right? I'm listening, and I'm like, something doesn't feel right about this. Yeah, I think I want to be a no. And so it's just, we need to be connected, all of us, the whole body, not just the head, not just the heart. And so I feel like being empowered sexually has really allowed me to be empowered and speak up in so many other ways.
And I think that empowerment, this is a really good point, Tori, because that empowerment, it goes in two directions. One, it gives you the right and the ability to kind of seek the things that you truly want, identify them, and then actually pursue them. But it also gives you the recognition of things that you don't want, right? And I think for me, I still have a ton of work to do around my own boundaries, because I was so afraid of reaching someone else's boundaries, and getting into a risky situation. I generally have trouble saying no to anything, right? Sexually or professionally or whatever. Like, I'm just that person who wants to help out, and this might not be what I want to do, but, you know, it's good overall, and just kind of, plug in that way. But that empowerment also gives you the ability to kind of come to a point where you say, you know, this is feedback that I'm going to provide you so that you can understand how to interact with me in a way that's enriching for both of us. Right? This is something that I understand why it's of value to you, but it's no longer of value to me. And that's new knowledge there for me to be able to stand up for my boundaries and to cherish myself. Once you are empowered, you can have the ability to love and care for yourself, regardless of what the world thinks. And I think that's really great.
Mm-hmm. I just want to add one more thing, because you brought something up for me, Bryan, which we didn't really touch on, but which is a huge thing, which is trauma. Because when we're not able to say no, which for many years I was not able to say no, because why would I say no to something if I'm here to serve and please somebody else, right? And I'm just here to be used. Why would I say no? I didn't know how to say no. Like you said, Danika, just like being able to have your boundaries. Like, there's so much trauma that I experience. I know so many other of our, Black folks have experienced in their bodies because of, this inability to say no. And so then we check out, we disassociate. And so I think that was in my sexuality for so many years. I was checked out. I was disassociated. I wasn't in my body. I wasn't experiencing what was happening, because if it wasn't for me, why do I need to be here? Right. So I think being able to know that my pleasure matters, my yes and my no matter, my sexuality, all of these things, that they matter, and that I have a say and I have a voice. I can live in my body, and I no longer have to check out. It can be safe to live in my body. I can process, and I have processed through the traumas that I have experienced in my body when I wasn't in it. And so that's just something I thought of. There's trauma is a big topic, and we could go into all that, but we're, just to say, like, being empowered has really helped me reclaim myself, my body, all of that, move through trauma.
It's so important. I'm so glad you brought it up, Tori, and trauma and how it relates to boundaries, and so that you don't keep getting re-traumatized and you can heal from it, to have those boundaries, Danika. Absolutely. We have this whole bunch of questions coming through now that are all in the same vein, and in the same vein of the final question that we wanted to ask too, which is, how can people in general, everyone, continue to support this change, to be an ally, both interpersonally in romantic relationships and also as organizations. And because you brought up your grocery store story, I'll just very quickly say mine. I was in line in a grocery store and I used to check, and the woman after me was Black and she used to check, and they did not ID me and they ID'd her. And I said, why are you IDing her? Like, I just used to check. And they said, it's our policy to ID everyone. And I said, no, it's not, because you didn't ID me, you know? And it's just like, so I think just in little ways where it doesn't seem so obvious, like we have to start interrupting and saying, it's not true, you know, like it's not okay.
Yeah, absolutely, Celeste. And I feel like that's exactly the kind of thing that I really appreciate. Like that just touched my heart, like just being able to use your voice like that and call out when someone is acting out discriminatorily. I don't know if that's the right word. That kind of, that just feels like a really powerful way. Like when I was standing in that line, if someone said something like that, I would have felt so much more a part of the community and not just like an other or outcasted like that. So using your voice when you can that feels absolutely important to me.
So whatever other input or whatever feelings you even have about those questions, we just want to hear.
I echo. I love that you're so outspoken, Celeste, because it's things like that. That's being an ally, right? It's like if you see something, you say something, and that touches me too. It's like, there's so many times. It's like it'd have been nice to have someone just like say something. Like I don't have to be the person that shrinks away, right, from a situation. And I think encouraging us to step up and to take up space, because like we talked about earlier, just like so many of us, have been taught to be small, to not shine, to not don't call any attention to yourself. And so I think, when you invited me to join this panel, I was excited about it, but terrified because it goes against that take up space thing. So in any ways that you can help people of color take up space and share their voice and know that their voice matters and that they have something to say and listen and really, really take it in. It's really important. I think sexually also, like helping people take up space, helping people explore and discover and, celebrating their sexuality and like, let's figure out what turns you on. Let's talk about it. Let's play with this. Like, let's get curious so that we can come out of these boxes of performance or like looking at how can we give you pleasure. And this is going to be all about you and like you practice receiving. So just in the sexual realm, those are just some things coming up. Another one I was thinking of is I wrote, be curious, not creepy. And that's like, I know that sometimes there is this like, well, you're different from me, so I'm curious about you, but to really come with a genuine curiosity, not from this, what's creepy is when someone's like, wow, look, it starts touching your skin and it's like, oh, your skin's it's so soft, it's so different. And it's just like, okay, thank you for touching me without asking. And thank you for like, like pointing out something like you're othering me there, but like get curious and ask questions and ask before you touch someone's body, before you touch someone's hair, just because that, yes, right. Don't just like, oh my gosh, your hair is so different. Like if you want to ask, be curious from a genuine place. I guess that's all. So a few things that come to mind.
Yeah, I just want to follow up on that because that you just knocked it out the park. Like with this otherness, racism and law enforcement brutality and injustice in general all stems from a lack of intimacy. You wouldn't do that to your mother. You wouldn't do that to your family member or to your friend. You can't do that thing until you other someone. And the thing that actually annoys me the most about everyone asking about how they can help is that it in many ways it others us. Oh, the Black community. No, we should be your community, right? And so I would encourage you, one, to find and cherish a Black community. Like, pay attention to them, learn the things about them, ask to be invited, to ask from a position of not coming in and having things run your way, but to be an observer and to see how things work and to understand things. So then when these types of things occur, you don't go to your colleague or your coworker or your neighbor and say, I can't imagine how you feel in this moment, because you actually can imagine how we feel because you've shared our experiences. Right? So that's probably the first thing that I would recommend. Stop othering us. Find and cherish a Black community. And the reason why I say find and cherish is because they need the encouragement themselves, as Tori called out. When we live in a space where if we poke our head up, something is there to hammer us down, it's important that there's someone who finds value in us. And people are going to be skeptical about your intentions, right? But vulnerability over protection, being willing to put yourself out there and be intentional in trying to see right in the world rather than being embarrassed that you'll get called out or that you'll get something wrong. Don't be afraid, right? Be respectful, but don't be afraid to make a fool out of yourself, because on the other side of being foolish is being connected. And so that's just picking up off of what Tori said. I personally get very cynical when people ask, because I don't get to ask people how I have to interact with like mainstream society, but for some reason everyone feels like they can be that we can be this fount of wisdom for them on how to act like a normal human being. And so the third thing that I would say is be sensitive to the fatigue that a Black person might have when you are earnestly seeking understanding. There are tons of books written and resources that are available, and some of those things will still fall short of being able to understand the full experience. But also remember that as you're reaching out for further understanding, that this is taking something from someone. This person had something that they were doing before they heard your question, and now they are choosing to put it on pause in order to extend something out to you. Be appreciative of that and give it the value that it deserves, so that they are encouraged and might consider it a positive experience worth doing again. I think those are probably the things that I would recommend.
Wow. It's really amazing. I do want to say that we first really honored to have you here, and we really wanted it to be your voices. And in addition, we also have a fundraiser running right now on the Somatica Institute Facebook page, and we invite you all to donate as well.
Yeah, I really want to appreciate it too. And there's some comments just appreciating this is so amazing and beautiful. Thank you all for sharing so vulnerably. It's really powerful, and I'm learning a lot from each of you. So I just want you to know that you asked for, Bryan, I agree. You are being appreciated in this moment for taking the time out of your busy lives. And I'm serious. What you're doing in your lives is important, and taking time out to educate people who, I think, as you kind of said, it's kind of common sense, take care of people in your community, listen to them, make sure everybody's voices get heard. But that's not how people are behaving. And so for you to take time out and to offer your experiences and your stories to create more empathy in the world is very, very valuable and very important. And we do understand that, your time is valuable. And that it can be exhausting to be like, okay, again, All right. Well, let me break it down for you. It makes a lot of sense why it's tiring. So thank you so much.
And I also really, really love the vulnerability and the being human and thinking what would it be like to be on the other side and share vulnerably, like empathy and vulnerability, like the tools of connection and intimacy.
So I don't know if any of y'all has any last things that you want to add that came up before we end. Or if you feel like, oh, that was good. We got it.